The air hung thick with incense, a choking haze of myrrh and frankincense that clawed at your throat. Drums pounded like distant thunder, echoing off marble walls veined with gold. Then came the sight: a young emperor, barely more than a boy, whirling in silk robes that shimmered under torchlight, his face painted, jewels dangling from his neck like captured stars. Around him, figures in white trembled, their veils torn, forced to circle a black stone that pulsed with unearthly power. One woman, her eyes wide with defiance, stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This ends the sacred fire," she whispered. But the boy laughed, pulling her closer, his ritual dagger glinting. The crowd of senators shifted uneasily, knowing this wasn't just a ceremony, it was desecration, and in that moment, the empire teetered. But that frenzy hid something darker, a chain of events that would drag Rome into scandal and blood. What you're about to hear involves violations of sacred vows, forced unions, and rituals that twisted faith into something profane. These events come from ancient chronicles, but they're raw and unsettling. If it hits too close, pause or skip ahead, I get it. For those pressing on, we'll peel back the layers, focusing not on the shock, but on the machinery of power that let it happen, the system that amplified one teenager's obsessions into an empire's nightmare. This wasn't random lunacy. This was a collision of worlds, where a Syrian priest-king slammed into Rome's iron traditions like a meteor. Picture the empire in 218 AD, still reeling from civil wars, its borders frayed by barbarians and its treasury drained. The Severan dynasty clung to power through cunning women and puppet rulers. Enter a 14-year-old from Emesa, a sun-baked city in Syria, thrust onto the throne by his ambitious family. He wasn't born to rule Rome, he was molded to worship a god few Romans knew. Yet, in 4 short years, he upended the pantheon, blending Eastern mysticism with Roman rite in ways that horrified the elite. The stakes? Nothing less than the soul of the empire. If his reforms stuck, Rome might have bowed to a single sun deity centuries before Constantine. But they didn't, because his overreach, especially with those sworn to eternal purity, sparked a backlash that echoes in how we view power's corruptions today. This story isn't about one mad boy. It's about how fragile traditions shatter when faith becomes a weapon. In the dusty streets of Emesa, where palm trees whispered secrets to the wind, a child grew up amid altars and omens. The boy, known then as Varius, spent his days in the grand temple of the sun god, a deity locals called Elagabal. This wasn't some distant idol, it was family. His clan had guarded the sanctuary for generations, tending a sacred black stone said to have fallen from the heavens. Young Varius danced before it in flowing robes, his high-pitched chants blending with the bleats of sacrificial lambs. The air always carried that metallic tang of blood, mixed with spices, a scent that would follow him like a shadow. His mother, a sharp-eyed woman from the imperial line, watched him closely, seeing not just a priest, but a tool for greater things. The empire's chaos shaped him early. Rome had chewed through emperors like a beast with endless hunger. Caracalla, his supposed cousin, met a bloody end on a dusty road, stabbed by his own guard. Power vacuum followed, sucking in opportunists. The boy's grandmother, a master of shadows with connections in the legions, saw her chance. She spread rumors. Varius was Caracalla's secret son, heir to the throne. Soldiers, starved for stability and bonuses, bought it. By spring of that year, at 14, Varius marched into Antioch at the head of an army, proclaimed emperor. He took the name Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, but history remembers him as Elagabalus, after his god. Rome welcomed him with parades and coin mints, unaware of the storm brewing. But origins aren't just places, they're scars. As a child priest, Elagabalus learned that divinity demanded spectacle dances that exhausted the body, offerings that proved devotion. One formative rite stood out. At 12, he led a procession where the black stone was paraded on a chariot pulled by white horses, the crowd prostrating as if the god itself drove. That power, the way people bent before stone and boy, hooked him. Then came the whispers of exile. His family, tied to the old regime, had fled Rome's purges, scraping by in Syria. Hardship twisted his view. Rome wasn't superior, it was a canvas for his faith. When the throne called, he didn't see governance. He saw a chance to elevate his god above Jupiter himself. And in that ambition, lay the seed of ruin. 3 months after his arrival in Rome, the turning point hit like a thunderclap. Elagabalus demanded the black stone be brought from Emesa. Not quietly, no, on a lavish journey across seas and mountains, escorted like a conquering hero. When it arrived, he built a massive temple on the Palatine hill, right next to the imperial palace. Senators grumbled, but who argued with an emperor? The stone, conical and dark as midnight, became the center of his world. He danced around it daily, clad in barbaric finery, long sleeves, makeup, wigs that scandalized the conservative elite. "This is no boy," they muttered in taverns. "This is a priest playing king." But he pushed further, declaring Elagabal the supreme deity, demoting Jupiter to a side role. Temples across the empire felt the shift. Old gods gathered dust while his sunlord blazed. The machinery kicked in. Priests from Syria flooded Rome. Legions swore oaths to the new cult, and taxes funneled into golden chariots for the stone's parades. It wasn't madness. It was a calculated rewrite of Rome's spiritual code, one that alienated the old guard but thrilled the eastern provinces. Yet the real overreach loomed the sacred guardians of Vesta's flame, women whose purity held the city's fate. He eyed them not as untouchable, but as pieces in his divine puzzle. The sun beat down on Rome's forum that sweltering afternoon, turning the marble slick with sweat. Crowds parted as the emperor's litter approached, carried by muscled slaves from distant lands. Inside, Elagabalus lounged, his painted eyes scanning the temples like a predator. The air hummed with vendors' calls and the distant low of oxen bound for sacrifice. But his gaze fixed on the house of the Vestals, that serene compound where 6 women tended Vesta's eternal fire, symbol of Rome's hearth and heart. Their vows of chastity weren't just personal. They warded the city from disaster. Break them, and gods might unleash famine or defeat. One Vestal stood out, a woman in her prime, her white robe spotless, her hair bound in ritual knots. She had served for years, chosen as a girl from a noble family, trained to guard secrets older than the empire. Before this storm, her days were quiet, sweeping ashes, mixing sacred cakes, whispering prayers that kept the flame alive. She walked with purpose, unaware that eyes followed her from the shadows. Friends knew her as devoted, her laughter rare but genuine in private moments. She dreamed of the freedom after 30 years' service marriage, perhaps, or quiet retirement. But empire had other plans. The confrontation brewed slowly, like a pot over low coals. Elagabalus summoned her to the palace under pretense of consultation. Guards escorted her through halls lined with eastern tapestries, the scent of exotic oils overpowering. He sat on a throne, the black stone looming behind like a silent judge. "Join me," he said, his voice soft but commanding. "Our union will birth gods." She froze. Vestals who broke vows faced burial alive, a fate whispered in nightmares. Yet he offered no real choice. This was imperial decree, wrapped in religious fervor. He claimed it mirrored his god's marriage to a celestial bride, blending cults into one. Refusal meant treason. She bowed her head, but inside, resolve hardened. This wasn't love, it was conquest. The act unfolded in secrecy at first, a forced wedding in the new temple. Drums rolled as priests chanted in foreign tongues. She stood rigid, her veil a thin barrier against the inevitable. He circled her, dagger in hand for the symbolic cut of old ties. Whispers spread through the attending elite. He's defiled the sacred. But details stayed veiled, implied in hurried divorces from prior wives, in her sudden elevation to empress. The union lasted months, but the stain lingered. Word rippled out like poison in water. Senators convened in hushed villas, decrying the breach. "This isn't rule," one grizzled veteran muttered. "It's sacrilege." But the system protected him. Legions loyal for gold, spies in every corner, his grandmother pulling strings from behind. This wasn't about one woman. It was about upending Rome's core, the Vestals as untouchable pillars. By claiming her, he signaled no tradition was safe. Historians debate if passion drove it or pure symbolism, but the impact echoed. In modern eyes, it parallels how leaders twist faith for control, like certain theocracies blending state and shrine. Yet for now, the machine churned on, grinding resistance under its wheels. From the vantage of a high-born advisor, the escalation looked like a fever dream spreading through the city. This man, seasoned in court intrigues, had served under prior emperors. his loyalty bought with land and titles. He watched as Elagabalus's whims grew bolder, the temple rituals morphing from oddity to obligation. Senators like him were dragged to don ceremonies, forced to don Syrian garb and clap as the emperor danced ecstatically around the stone. The air reeked of slaughtered beasts, blood pooling on mosaic floors. But whispers hinted at worse. Children gathered for darker offerings, though evidence remains thin, debated by scholars as propaganda. The perversion extended to the remaining guardians of Vesta's flame. With one already bound to him, Elagabalus eyed the others, seeing them as vessels for his blended faith. Ancient accounts claim he compelled 4 more into the rites, not as brides, but as participants in profane ceremonies. They, women sworn to purity, were made to circle the black stone, their chants twisted to honor a foreign god over their own. One, a elder priestess with graying hair, resisted quietly, slipping notes to allies outside. Another, younger and fiery, wept openly during a forced dance, her white robe soiled by incense ash. The emperor laughed it off, calling it divine ecstasy. But this wasn't isolated, it was systemic. Priests enforced attendance, rewards flowed to informants, punishments to doubters. Whole districts emptied for parades where the stone rode triumphant, crowds cheering under threat. Numbers tell the tale in human strokes, temples repurposed, festivals disrupted, families torn when nobles fled. Yet, amid the frenzy, a breather, a quiet irony. In the palace gardens, under blooming roses, Elagabalus would pause, feeding peacocks with jeweled hands, murmuring to his god as if seeking approval. It was a child's whimsy in a tyrant's body, a reminder that power often masks vulnerability. From this angle, the escalation wasn't blind. It was a desperate push to imprint his world on Rome's. He married again, divorcing the first Vestal, only to reclaim her, cycling through unions like seasons. Scandals piled, rumors of male lovers, public cross-dressing, offers of fortune for surgeons to alter his body. The advisor noted it all, his reports feeding growing dissent. But the machine incentivized silence promotions for compliance, exile for critique. This phase showed the spread, from palace to provinces, one ritual at a time. Historians argue the exact toll, but villages felt the pull, their youth conscripted for spectacles. And, in that widening net, the breaking point loomed, a mistake that would crack the facade. Time slowed in the temple's inner sanctum that fateful dawn, torches flickering like dying stars. The air thickened with smoke, drums building to a crescendo that rattled bones. Elagabalus, adorned in gold-threaded silks, stood before the black stone, his face a mask of rapture. Around him, the 4 compelled women moved in uneasy rhythm, their white garments now stained with ritual oils. One, the eldest, stumbled, her eyes locking on the emperor's with unspoken accusation. The crowd, senators, guards, sycophants held breath, sensing the peak. The climax hit when he demanded the ultimate fusion. Vesta's flame merged with his sun god's essence. He ordered the women to extinguish their sacred fire, relight it from his altar's blaze. Unity, he proclaimed, voice echoing, but implication hung heavy. This erased Rome's heart, subordinating ancient rite to his import. The eldest refused outright, dashing a vessel to the floor, shards scattered like omens. Guards moved, but hesitation rippled. Even loyalists balked at assaulting Vestals, whose violation courted divine wrath. In that stretch of moments, senses sharpened, the acrid burn of herbs, the metallic clink of chains, shadows dancing on walls carved with foreign symbols. He pressed on, dagger raised for a symbolic cut, but overreach showed. Whispers among the Praetorians grew the elite guard, once bought, now alienated by endless humiliations. One, a battle-hardened captain with scars from Parthian wars, exchanged glances with allies. This wasn't devotion, it was hubris, inviting God's revenge. The women, though unbroken in spirit, cracked under pressure. One fainted, another murmured prayers to old deities. The error crystallized. By targeting these symbols of purity, Elagabalus alienated not just elite, but the masses who revered Vesta's guardians. Riots simmered in streets, fueled by rumors of divine displeasure, crops failing, omens in the sky. His grandmother, sensing the tide, began plotting with his cousin, a steadier youth. The system, once his shield, turned. That ritual didn't end in blood that day, but implication did the work. Purity defiled, traditions shattered. What broke wasn't the women, it was the emperor's grip. Guards muttered of replacement, senators of restoration. The peak passed, leaving a hush, but the crack widened, leading inexorably to the river's edge. In the aftermath, fate closed like a vice. Elagabalus's hold slipped that spring, his antics no longer amusing but alarming. The Praetorians, backbone of power, turned first, humiliated by forced dances, starved of respect. His grandmother, architect of his rise, orchestrated the fall, promoting his cousin as co-ruler to stabilize things. But jealousy flared. Elagabalus plotted against the boy, sealing his doom. On a March day in 222, in the imperial latrines of all places, the guard struck. Blades flashed, blood spilled, his body dragged through streets by hooks, then tossed into the Tiber. His mother perished beside him, her ambitions drowned. Survivors scattered. The compelled women, if accounts hold, returned to shadows, their order restored under the new emperor. Communities rebuilt, temples reconsecrated, the black stone shipped back to Emesa like a banished curse. Power shifted to steadier hands. His cousin, Severus Alexander, ushered in relative calm, though the Severan line teetered. Long-term scars lingered, religious tensions simmered, foreshadowing later Christian shifts. One ironic twist, the documents meant to damn him preserved his story, turning scandal into legend. The empire adapted, but the breach lingered, a reminder that faith's weaponization invites backlash. Modern eyes uncovered layers through digs and dusty scrolls. In the 19th century, excavators on the Palatine unearthed temple foundations, marble fragments etched with sun motifs confirming the Elagabalium's grandeur. Coins surfaced too, stamped with the black stone on chariots, proving the cult's push. A French archaeologist in the 1,880 seconds pieced together inscriptions, revealing how senators funded the rites under duress. These finds humanize the tale, not just myth, but tangible power plays. In Syria, Emesa's ruins yielded altar stones, linking boy to birthplace. What they proved? The rituals happened, though extremes like sacrifices remain debated, perhaps exaggerated by victors to justify the kill. Why does it echo now? This teaches how outsiders in power clash with norms, much like modern leaders imposing fringe beliefs on institutions. Think of regimes blending state and sect, eroding separations that protect. At core, it's a universal truth. Unchecked zeal devours its host, but resistance from quiet defiers to turning guards restores balance. Elagabalus's story warns of systems that amplify one voice over many, reminding us power's true test is restraint. Back to that smoke-filled temple, where drums once thundered. Now, silence reigns, the stone long gone, the women faded to echoes. They were meant to vanish, erased by decree and damnatio, but they didn't. Their stand survives in chronicles, in unearthed relics, in the memory of a city that endured. And now, they're here with you, because you listened through the haze. If this stirred something, drop a comment below what shocks you most about how faith twisted into control. Subscribe for more shadows from history's edge. In the end, stories like this remind us, empires fall, but truths rise like the sun.